I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking again about the sub-slab depressurization systems and remote monitoring. We've been presenting this at most of these meetings the past year or two, because we've spent a lot of time trying to get a handle on this and to improve the compliance with the remote monitoring. The reason we talk about it over and over again is we still have a ways to go, and we think this is an important issue. This is a new part of the regulations, the 2014 amendments, allowing you to have a permanent solution that relies upon a SSD system. And one of the requirements for that being a valid long-term solution is to have the remote monitoring and have it working correctly and communicating with the department correctly. So we're making progress, but I did really want to go through this and show you the numbers just so you can see how we're looking at it and why we really want to continue to send the message out there to have you work on these if you have them and get them into compliance. It has been, up until this point, more of a compliance assistance approach that we've been taking, but as time goes on and you have permanent solutions that are relying on these, but this is not working properly, that really means it's not meeting the requirements of a permanent solution. So it will become more of an issue where we'd be identifying this as a problem in an audit. So we have 92 remote monitoring devices that are at 53 sites, or 53 RTNs. And these are the ones that have completed that initial online registration process in order to set up the ability to be sending messages to us when the system shuts down and restarts. So of those 92 devices, 48 completely registered, working properly. 35, they've done the initial registration, but they're still in that stage where they're working with us and working, LSPs are also working on working out those formatting issues so that they communicate with us properly. There are 6 where we haven't yet been able to make contact with the PRP or the LSP, with the point of contact for the system. And then there are some devices that, as we looked into it, it was determined that they were no longer needed, which is, that's something that will happen over time where somebody has registered the system, but then after some testing determined it's not necessary to support whatever permanent solution, temporary solution, or remedy operation status. So 55% of them, when you look at the ones that are required to have remote monitoring, because we do have systems where people have registered them prior to being at a temporary solution, permanent solution, or remedy operation status. But when you look at the numbers where these are required as part of that milestone or endpoint, 55% are working properly. So want to highlight this because as we're going forward and talking about the MCP amendments, one of the things we also want to confirm is that the changes we made back in 2014 are working correctly, and if they're not, what else do we need to do to make them work correctly, or do we need to reevaluate this sort of endpoint? So we all want this to work, and this is just one more message. I know Paul talked about it at UMass as well, and we've been pushing this, but one more public service announcement that if you have any questions about that, you get in contact with us. We want to work to help make this easier for everyone to get into compliance. Yeah.
Do you by any chance have a list of vendors that are providing systems that are turnkey and working that you can share with me?
We do, don't we? Do we? Do we, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, it's not on the website or anything, but you can.
I have a feeling you might know. I mean, especially with the few percent, the low percentage that are actually working, it'd be nice to know which of those are, who we can go to get those.
Yes. So what we've done in the last couple of months is the regions are starting to go out and do inspections of these systems. And we've developed a handout so that when we go out and meet with the PRP or the LSP and they ask us that question, we can provide them with a list of vendors that we know of that are able to meet these standards. And we're very careful to say we're not endorsing any of these, but from what we know, these work.
Question?
Hey Liz, just wondering, when you said list, I was like, oh, that's my question. Is there a list of the sites?
The list of the sites?
Yeah, that have these. Is that available anyway?
Yeah. It's not publicly available.
Well, I mean, we have it.
We have it, yeah.
Well, I hope so.
We haven't made it publicly available.
Yeah. Is that something you, I mean, yeah, I mean, is that something you could make available, or is there a way to do a query on EDEP, or?
Paul, could we make that available?
I think we have to think a little bit more about it, because as Liz, if for no other reason, as Liz mentioned, right now it's more compliance assistance, but you can imagine what she left kind of didn't continue on after compliance assistance, and we don't have the compliance, it becomes enforcement.
Yeah.
So we have to, I think we need to talk and think about kind of how much of this is kind of enforcement sensitive versus kind of where the balance is between making it public and making it available may help get better compliance versus the whole enforcement thing.
Yeah, no, I actually wasn't that interested in what the status of each of any particular one might be as to just the location of the systems themselves, but I understand.
If you do have a question about whether or not a site you might have worked on is on the list.
Yeah, no, that wasn't the specific question, but no, I know we could.
If you do have that question, give me a call, because I can look up that information for you.
And we can figure out kind of. We'll have a discussion about the extent to which we can make things available and what would be useful.
Yeah. Thanks.
Wendy?
Yes, so maybe I missed the full response, but are you able to make that list of vendors who are providing systems that can meet the standards? Are you able to make that available? Is that something we should go to the regions to get?
I think we probably can make that available. We've been kind of reluctant to do that just because it gets us in that bind of whether or not we're endorsing it. Mm-hmm. But truth be told, we've already produced this document, so it's already a public document, right? Something we're using.
So I would consider that an
invitation.
In which case, we'll be very responsive to you.
Can I just send you an email?
That would work too.
Okay.
I mean, I hope you can appreciate how we're trying to play this, because we just don't want it to look like an endorsement, and we haven't investigated all the systems out there, so things would be left off the list that probably may work, and we just don't have it.
Well, Liz, don't have a disclaimer on top saying these are not endorsements, just
Yeah.
systems we found that were.
Yep, I think we even have that on our internal fact sheet that's what it says. So, yeah, I think we can do that. Does that sound good, Paul? Yeah. We can do that. Okay. And when we're asked, we'll say it was demanded of us that we produce this document. So beyond what I just mentioned, so we talked about the 55% that are working 100% the way we would want them to be working. There are still 40 sites, some permanent solutions, most of them remedy operation status and temporary solutions, where the information we have indicates that they have an SSD system, but we have no initial registration. So we have this other group where they haven't even taken that first step. It may be that some of those systems don't really need to rely on the SSD to have remedy operation status or temporary solution, so we don't know that piece, but we suspect that a good portion of them have just not done the initial registration. So that's another issue.
So Liz, if we're aware of a site that might have an SSD but is not necessary to meet the requirements for a permanent solution, would it be helpful if we contacted you?
Yeah, that would be helpful. That would be helpful. We've kind of, to the extent that we've been able to look into it, we've looked at, the risk characterization to see what information. Sometimes you get an explicit statement that here's why we have it, or don't have. Here's why we have it, but that's not always the case. So that would be helpful.
So for those, have you moved those from your statistics? The ones that you know have systems that actually don't need to be operating?
We have this all now on a spreadsheet, so that note will be there. So where we determine that it's not necessary, we've noted that. One of the issues we have, and this is kind of the merging of the reg requirements with the transmittal forms, is we have to piece together finding these by looking at whether or not they checked off an SSD system on the transmittal form. So there's not a clear checkbox for this. That's a possible. Yeah, that's a possible form revision in the future. So this is to the best of our ability to kind of capture these and identify these, what we are seeing. And then there's one more piece. It's still early days for those sites that have a permanent solution with an SSD system, and that they've gone beyond 1 year from filing that permanent solution, where they have to provide an annual certification. I think there are three sites so far where they've gone beyond that year, and DEP has sent them the annual certification letter. We send it out, and they're to check off that yes, we have the system, yes, it's operating according to the regimen in the permit solution statement. Yes, we have the financial ability to repair it or replace it if necessary. I can't remember what the last item is. So of those, we've sent out 3 letters, and we've had 2 returned, and we're getting no response from the third party. So this is another thing that concerns us, because we're only into this now 1 year, and this is one of the pieces where we are able to be reassured that the person that has the system, because property may change hands over time, understands what the system's for and that it needs to continue to operate. Getting this certification letter back saves us from having to go out and arrange to confirm that they have the system and go through all of those steps. So that's another thing to be aware of. I think if you're using one of these as part of a permanent solution, it would be really important to have this initial discussion with the person that's taking on the responsibility for providing this annual certification letter, to tell them that this is something that you'll be seeing annually from DEP, just so they recognize that.